welcome everyone to tonight's small talk evening. I am Jennifer. I am the assistant curator at the Transcona Museum, and I will be leading the talk today. With us as well is Alana, our museum curator, who is working behind the scenes. She will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions or comments, or if my audio cuts in and out, please let Alana know and she will let me know. So once again, welcome. As always, let's hope our internet connection stays strong. For those of you who may not know, Small Talk Tuesday and Small Talk Evening, they are a casual and lively discussion with the Transcona Museum curators on topics related to the museum and the community of Transcona. Thank you for joining us today. As you may have noticed, all mics have been muted and videos have been turned off. To ask questions or to communicate throughout the presentation, please use the chat function. It's located at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to ask questions throughout the talk, but if you do post anything inappropriate, you will be removed from the chat. At the end of our talk tonight, there will be a Q&A using the chat function, so that's a great chance to answer any questions that you may have. I'll also be answering questions from the previous South Transcona small talk we did last week. So I think without any further ado, we'll get started. Whoops, do I have control? Whoops.
Yes.
There we go. Okay, so to begin, we'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. Tonight's talk is on the history of South Transcona, so we'll be discussing the origins of the community, businesses, and other types of businesses that used to operate in the community, as well as kind of what happened in terms of its initial development. So the origins of South Transcona, there's been considerable discussion as to whether the original community of Transcona was to be developed in what is now considered the South Transcona area. So a lot of individuals who lived in South Transcona have told us that South Transcona was to be the original Transcona. However, we have other documents in our archives and newspapers and other research I've done for this talk that would argue that no, South Transcona was not meant to be a part of Transcona initially. So we'll talk about the original town site first. The land surveys of 1908 to 1910 reveal that South Transcona was to be a well-designed community layout with at least 8 planned subdivisions. One report in the Manitoba Free Press claimed that about 200 lots in South Transcona were sold by one firm within a few weeks in August 1913. And this early real estate boom was supported by the rapid construction of wooden sidewalks. There was a grand hotel, a fire hall, a school, a church, and other businesses. Unfortunately, though, because this area was so low-lying, it was subject to periodic flooding in the springtime. Drainage ditches were dug and hundreds of loads of gravel were actually hauled in and spread to a depth of about 8 feet just to secure the foundation of the Transcona shops themselves. So it was actually not uncommon for the streets in South Transcona to become like a really sticky, thick mud in springtime. And this would prove to be an ongoing problem for many, many years. And by the end of the First World War, South Transcona's early activities and initial developments will come to an end, while the town would continue to develop north of the Transcona shops. So this is a picture here from about 1923, illustrating flooding in the South Transcona area. I apologize for the blurriness. That's just the quality of the photograph itself. A bit more of a clearer image here from about 1945, once again demonstrating that significant flooding that would occur in the springtime. And if you can see my mouse here, we're actually The photograph is south, looking northward towards the shops, and this building here, this white building on the right, is the South Transcona School. So there was actually a bit of a battle over boundaries regarding whether or not South Transcona should be included in the initial development and land layout plans for Transcona. And shortly after the formation of the Transcona Board of Trade in 1911, discussions of incorporating as a town would begin. The initial plan for Transcona did not include any property south of the railway shops because of the increased costs related to water, fire, and sewage systems. They would have to essentially double all of this. So there was a lot of reasons why not to include South Transcona. As well, travel between the north and south communities was also raised as an issue. In the end, Premier Roblin and his government would favor including the southern region and the railway shops in the new boundaries, and they forwarded a plan to this effect. And in 1912, the Law Amendments Committee of the Manitoba Legislature eventually decided that yes, South Transcona and the Transcona shops were to be included in the new town of Transcona boundaries. As the Winnipeg Tribune would report on the proceedings, the people of Transcona fought bitterly against the portion south of the shops being included, but their efforts were futile. So after this battle over boundaries, South Transcona would witness a period of tremendous optimism and growth, and by 1913, there would be about 241 residents listed as either living or having purchased lots in South Transcona. As I mentioned, the town site of South Transcona was to have no less than 8 named subdivisions. The electoral list of 1915 indicates that the majority of these land lots in the subdivisions were purchased, but many would remain undeveloped. This would change ultimately in the 30s as many of the subdivision plans were cancelled through bylaws passed by the Town Council of Transcona. And in 1938, the electoral list would support this development change as residents occupied the areas mostly associated with the present-day South Transcona. So this is a map detailing the original layout design for South Transcona with those 8 planned subdivisions. This comes from a fire insurance plan from about the 1920s. And it's perhaps one of my favorite items in our archive. Zooming in a little bit here, so this is this is the left side of the map we're looking at. And if you can see my mouse, all the way on the far left here is Grand Trunk City. This was a subdivision that would be canceled by 1930. It was located at Dugald Road and Plessis Road, and today it's mostly private homes and condos that have been built in this area. You can see Plessis Road running right here. Just beside it, at the top here on the left, is Transcona Heights. It too was canceled in 1930. Residents were given new lots north of the Transcona shops, and this area has since been redeveloped into the Transcona Golf Club. Just below Transcona Heights is GTP Town, or Grand Trunk Pacific Town. It was canceled in 1930, and this subdivision remains farmland along Plessis Road and St. Boniface Road. Moving over to the right, we have the East Winnipeg town site, and the majority of present-day South Transcona has been developed in this area. And at the very bottom here, just this tiny little subdivision, this is Grand Trunk Point, smallest of all the subdivisions, and it remains farmland today along St. Boniface Road. So zooming in more on the right side of that initial map, looking at the left here, if you can see my mouse.
Oh, we have a question.
Oh, yeah.
How did they choose the names of the streets?
The names of the streets?
Yes, these initial planned names.
I honestly am not sure where most of the names would come from.
From the experience with the North Transcona side, when the initial layouts were planned by the essentially developers, they put in street names because Madeline is actually named after W.J. Christie's daughter, and he was the man who owned the land that the town, like Transcona, is on, not the shops land, but the residential land. So it is my guess, not confirmed, that it was the developer as they were developing these areas, they came up with the street names. That's my best guess at this point.
Mm-hmm. As well as you'll notice too that a lot of the original names are First Street, Second Street, Third Street. We'll discuss this a little later, but these are not the names that are currently used in South Transcona. They were changed over.
Some were, yes.
Mm-hmm. So Grand Trunk Place right here on the left, it was canceled in 1935, and many of the residents were given new lots in the former parish of Kildonan, and Beulah Recreation Park occupies the majority of this development today. And beside it is Springfield Place. Canceled in 1936, residents were given lots in the former East Winnipeg town site, so just a couple blocks over. And the Beulah Recreation Park occupies the majority of this development now. So now we'll discuss some of the businesses and organizations that existed in the early days. And just to zoom in on that map, we will be focusing on this area right in here, mostly the church, the school, and the fire hall. To begin with, just so you have an idea of where I'm talking on the map. So fire hall number 2. In 1912, land was set aside in Grand Trunk Place subdivision for a fire hall, and this would be the second fire hall in Transcona, and it was located along Copeland Street and Rennie Avenue. It was built in 1914 at a cost of $5,000, and the fire hall will remain in operation until 1930. It was equipped with 2 manually drawn fire pumps and a ladder wagon. Allegedly, though, this equipment was never used, and that equipment would later be sold in 1933 in order to purchase new equipment for Fire Hall 1, located in Transcona, north of the shops, along Victoria Avenue. At the time of its closing in 1930, Town Council offered the building to be purchased as a schoolhouse, but the offer was never taken. And so by 1938, the fire hall was eventually sold to the Transcona Curling Club, who used the building's materials to construct the former curling rink that was located at Day Street and Melrose Avenue East. Whoops. So there's a picture of the South Transcona Fire Hall number 2, a very stately, grand-looking building. And then a photo of the Transcona Curling Club building. As I mentioned, the materials from Fire Hall 2 were used to construct this building here on Day Street. Springfield School number 1569, otherwise known as South Springfield School, South Transcona School, and Southside School. There were a few Springfield schools in the Transcona Springfield School district. Funny enough, though, this was the most south of all the Springfield schools, though there was a South Springfield located north in Transcona, hence why it was eventually later given a South Springfield name once the original South Springfield closed. Highly confusing. It makes sense to me now because I've done this talk a number of times and done the research, but so the South Springfield School District was established in May of 1911, and a two-story, four-room schoolhouse was built on Copeland Street in 1920. Prior to the construction of the school, classes were held in the Campbell home on McFadden Avenue. In the first year, there was an enrollment of 40 students from grades 1 to 5, and by 1922, the curriculum was expanded to cover grades 1 to 11. In subsequent years, however, secondary education for grades 9 to 11 would be discontinued.
And those students would have gone to school in north of the shops.
Yes.
They were bused there.
Yeah. This original schoolhouse was replaced in 1955 by a new modern four-classroom building erected just to the north of the first school. Enrollment for that year was 110 students from grades 1 to 8. The schoolhouse was closed in June of 1969 as students were already being bused to schools north of the Transcona shops. And this former school building is still standing in South Transcona, but it is used as a private residence today. A photograph of the original school building here. Another view of the building, the church in the background right here, we will be discussing in a few moments. Another view of the school taken from a little ways back. Now, I'm fairly certain, just because of the way the photographs are taken, the school entrance faced south, so on this photograph we are looking north. And then the new school building that would be constructed. Now this photograph is of Mr. Garth, who was a caretaker of Springfield School. And the photograph is from our archives, and on the back there was a bit of a biography written on Mr. Garth. So I have that info and I'll read it right now. He was a very good gardener, but a man of sorrow. He had come to Canada to make enough money to support his wife in a nursing home in England. The photograph was taken just before he left England. He was a musician and could play the organ and piano. He tended the little garden plots at the school and taught the school children to garden and tend those plants. When any child was ill, he would take flowers to them and was noted as being a very kind man. So the Southwind United Church slash South Transcona Church, and Southwind was a community that existed to the east, thank you, of South Transcona. Essentially, the community, where's that things?
The boundaries.
Pardon?
The boundaries were from like the cemetery up to north of that, where they're building that new development across Dugald Road, to across the floodway, and like across the floodway, and then south of it.
It went
more.
South a ways.
Yeah.
The perimeter highway and the Red River floodway essentially cut the community right in half. So after that, the community kind of just dissolved away. But it was a significant community that existed prior to the establishment of Transcona. And we will actually be talking about Southwind in a later small talk coming up in a couple weeks. But the church, so the Southwind Presbyterian Church, would close in 1916, and it was located actually in the Transcona Cemetery, or the grounds that are now the Transcona Cemetery. And the few remaining members of the congregation would continue to meet for service in the Springfield School until 1925. That same year, the Dugald Methodist Church was purchased and it moved to South Transcona along Copeland Street. The congregation of the new Southwind United Church, also known as the South Transcona Church, was reestablished. They reestablished church services and Sunday school for many, many years. But by 1938, after dwindling membership, the church was officially closed, and that frame building was sold and relocated. So this is the purchased Dougal Church being moved to the new site.
Oh, another question.
Yep.
Any information on the name Southwin?
It's just an amalgamation of two words. So Seth comes from, I believe, Sutherland. He was the first post office manager in that community. And then Win is just a random word, and they just put Seth and Win together. So you can see the church just right back here, and this being the Springfield School right here. So about the 1930s, this photograph. The Transcona railway station, it was constructed around 1910 and was located south of the main line at Plessis Road. The structure was classified as one of the National Transcontinental's distinctive third-class stations. There are only two of these stations still standing in Manitoba, with the one being located at Enola. The station design features a strong symmetrical roof with projecting hipped gable dormers and a characteristic second story, although it's not clear whether it served as a living quarters or not. The station would be relocated and it was used as a rail yard office, later demolished in 1994. So a photograph of that original railway station around the 1910s. The station after its relocation. And it was relocated near to the malting plant. The South Transcona Community Club. It was first organized in 1919, and their first meeting place was in a hall previously used as a barber shop and a pool room located along Fuller Avenue next to the former Grand Trunk Hotel. As a quick aside, according to local histories, the barber shop would contain a single chair, and it failed as a business since most men in the community would simply cut their own hair. Prices were recorded as being 30 cents for a cut and 15 cents for a shave, and top wages for workers at the time were $2 for a 10-hour day. Within a few years, the club would cease operations and the building was demolished. And in 1927, the club was reorganized and meetings were held in Central School. And in 1958, the club purchased the present building at Borden Avenue. The Grand Trunk Hotel. There's very little information, unfortunately, on this hotel. I was doing some more research this morning in hopes to find new info, but alas, I did not. All I know is that it was built in South Transcona along Fuller Avenue sometime in the 1910s. It was a three-story building with single and double room suites on the upper two floors. The main floor would consist of a large kitchen, a large dining room, and a men's-only parlor room and bar room. And there were separate quarters on the main floor reserved for the hotel manager and his family. The hotel was demolished in the late 1920s following a period of decline in South Transcona. So this is a photo here of the Transcona shops, and this is actually the roundhouse right here. So this is the southern end of the Transcona shops. And in the background at the very top of the screen, this is South Transcona. And I cannot quite say, but based on the year of the photograph, the Grand Trunk Hotel may be in the photo, it may not be, but it's also just a really good record of some of the potential early businesses that existed in South Transcona.
And we don't have many photographs of South Transcona or many artifacts related to history of South Transcona as well. So we're always looking to add more of those items into the collection as well.
Mm-hmm. Street names. In 1959, Town Council of Transcona passed bylaw number 148-59, which would change several of the original street names in South Transcona. A few of the other streets would be renamed in the early 60s, but the rest would remain as they were originally penned in that first land survey. Perhaps the most notable street in South Transcona was the original Regent Avenue, and this was renamed to Webster Avenue.
Oh, another question.
Mm-hmm.
Was the hotel owned by the Grand Trunk Railway, or was it just named after the railway?
I'm not sure.
That's a good question. We're going to have to look into that one.
Yeah. I suppose either could be true.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I'm always researching for more information on that hotel. So maybe one day I will have the answer.
And we had another comment that the railway did own a lot of hotels. So it is a possibility. We will definitely do some more research and see if we can't. That's another avenue to look at when we're doing research as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So the street names, I have a few here, most certainly not all of them. So the new is on the left, the new name, and the original on the right in brackets. And we do have some information regarding why the streets were renamed and who they were named after. So Symington Road was named after Herbert James Symington, who was a lawyer and a Canadian National Railway executive in the 1930s. And this road was originally Selkirk Road. Goodyear Avenue, named after Charles Goodyear, a town councillor from 1916 to 1921, and was a general store owner in Transcona. There is an unconfirmed story that he was a performer in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, and this was originally Mulvey Avenue. Rennie Avenue, named after George Rennie, a World War I veteran and Canadian National Railway worker and member of Town Council from 1922 to 1934. Originally Ashland Avenue. Fuller Avenue, named after Harry Fuller, the last mayor of Transcona before amalgamation with the city of Winnipeg in 1972. This was originally Campbell Avenue. Vessel Avenue, named after Mr. and Mrs. Joseph Vessel, who lived on Flora Avenue for over 45 years. And yes, the original name of the street was Flora Avenue. Reed Avenue, we don't have much information as to the naming behind Reed Avenue. Possibly it was named for the Reed family of Transcona. There is a William Reed Park named for William Douglas Reed, who was a member of the Transcona Horticultural Society. He was also a citizen member of the Transcona Parks Board from 1950 to 1954. It could also be named for one of his three sons, Bill, Daniel, or Norman. We're not all too sure. That was a question we had last week. We're doing more research into that, so hopefully we'll be able to confirm the naming behind Reed Avenue.
Because when these streets were renamed, there was information that was published in the local newspaper. So we've gotten some information from there. And then we did do a like oral history talk with Paul Martin, because he was mayor, or he was on the town council at the time of a lot of the street name changes, to get extra information from that. So that's where we have some of the information. But currently all that information is back at the museum. And we don't have access to it at the moment as much as we normally do.
Mm-hmm. Murdoch Road, another street we don't have much information on. This was originally Lorette Avenue. Copeland Street, originally First Street, named after Thomas Copeland, a former mayor of Transcona. And finally, Taggart Street, originally Second Street, named after James T. Taggart, a veteran town councillor from 1926 to 1936 and prominent Transcona community member. And then we have some other photographs depicting South Transcona. So this one here depicts VE Day celebrations from 1945. The opening of the new Springfield School in 1955, and it was officially opened by this gentleman here, Mayor Johnston of Transcona. A streetscape in winter from 1956. I'm not sure which street this would be. Oops. Go. The Transcona Golf Club, originally built in 1931. A photograph of the South Transcona girls softball team from 1933. The photograph is a little blurry, so I can't make out what their team name would be on their uniforms. A photograph of the Hopwoods home from the 1920s. And the archives or the information on this photograph, it didn't state which street this would have been in South Transcona. So unfortunately, I don't have that info. The South Transcona 4-H curators from 1964. And that's them right there in the middle of the photo. And then we have a series of photos from the Springfield School fire from 1965. Last week we had a question on what caused the fire. I did a little research and I was able to find some information. So from the Winnipeg Free Press in May of 1965, it states that 3 juvenile boys were arrested by the Transcona police in connection with a fire which rendered this schoolroom unusable for the rest of the school year. The police said that 2 of the boys were aged 15 and 10 and were being held in custody. A third boy, a 10-year-old, was released into the custody of his parents. The school, which accommodated 101 students at the time, suffered damage in one classroom and the building's hallways when the blaze broke out at about 1 a.m. The rest of the interior sustained heavy smoke and water damage, and officials estimated that it was about $15,000 worth of damage. A school board member said that 4 rooms have been provided for the students at Murdoch McKay High School, and classes would probably begin there the following Wednesday. Due to the damage, though, the Springfield School was closed and for repair and reopened later that September.
We got another question. Does Hopwood's house still exist?
I don't know. That's a great question.
Yeah, because we don't know what street it was on. Where we don't, it's hard to determine if that house still exists. One of the ways that we do research for houses and people is like Henderson directories, because often if you know the street, it lists the people who live on it. And there are some available online that we can go through. We just haven't had any luck yet trying to determine the street that it's on.
There might be information in the electoral lists. Sometimes they provide information.
Yes.
But because I don't have a lot in plan numbers for much of South Transcona, sometimes that information can only get you so far.
Mm-hmm.
Just some more photographs here of that fire, the damage to that one classroom. And so now we're at the live Q&A period. So if you have any additional questions or comments, please use the chat function and we will do our best to answer.
Yes. We had a question last week. What was the first restaurant in South Transcona? And we weren't able to find out any information yet. Correct, Jen?
Still working on that one.
Yeah.
Right now I'm trying to figure out if the newspapers would have called South Transcona,
Mm.
or if they would have referred to perhaps the subdivision plan names.
Right. We do have another question. Where was the Southwind United Church relocated to?
I'm not sure. That we can look into, and maybe we would be able to find some info.
And the questions that we're not able to answer tonight, we are researching them. We are going to, once we have answers, either create like a blog post or do some posts on social media answering your questions that we've received through all these virtual small talks that we've been doing. So we'll let you know if we're able to find out.
One of the other questions we had last week is someone noticed that the streets and the avenues didn't seem to be running in the same directions as they do in Transcona, north of the shops. Our best guess is that those were just the way that they were planned by the developers.
And land surveyors, yeah.
Yeah, and there is actually no standard when it comes to if avenues run north, south, east, west, or streets run north, south, east, west. It just kind of all depends on where you're living. And two, because Winnipeg didn't form as a single community until 1972, Winnipeg's kind of town plan is a little bit crazy because it was all those little tiny communities. So there is no standard layout for roads.
Any other questions from anyone? Oh, one question that we always like to ask is, where is everyone joining us from? Are people from Transcona? Are people who previously lived in Transcona or living somewhere else now? We've had people attend these talks from out of province. So it's always kind of nice to know where people are joining us from. Another question, are there any plaques recognizing original South Transcona landmarks such as the hotel, school, church?
Not to my knowledge.
Yeah, not to mine either. I'm just also writing down everyone's questions as well. Oh, we have someone joining us from Symington Road. Welcome.
And if you have any questions that you thought of after the fact, please email us.
Or send us a message on social media, through Facebook, anywhere, and we'll add them to our list of questions that we're researching.
We really love researching. It's probably one of our favorite things to do.
We have someone from West Transcona, born in England, joining us today as well. Okay, So again, if you think of any other questions, oh, we have someone from West Transcona who's originally from Ontario.
Hmm.
Um, Another question, do you have more stuff on South Side at the museum? We have a few artifacts related to South Transcona, but like I said earlier, we don't actually have a lot. So we're always looking when items are offered that come from South Transcona, there are always things that I'd like to add to the collection if we can. Just because it is underrepresented in our collection, both archivally and our actual artifacts. So we are always looking. We have a few, I believe that photo of the girls' softball team, we have one of the sweaters in our collection. But we don't have that many, so we're always looking for, sorry, excuse me, artifacts and archival materials related to Southside. And putting out a call through the Transcona Views or the Herald would be a way to get it out there that we are looking for these things. So that is a very good recommendation.
Hmm. I mean, I would just love some more photographs.
Yes, yeah. Photograph, and it's some, you know, we may actually have more in our collection and just not know it, because with some of the photographs in our collection, they're not identified, or when things were donated, history wasn't gathered on all of them. So they might be people in front of businesses. Those might actually be in South Transcona, but if it's not identified, we don't know that.
Hmm.
So it's always something, because we've actually we have a number of pictures where the Southside School, the original one, is visible in the background. And I was going through the database and I saw it listed saying, oh, this might be Central School. And I looked at it and went, that's not Central School. And now I know that's the Southside School. So I've gone back and re-identified that as being the Southside original school. We've had another question. Is it free to come to the museum? The museum is admission by donation when we're open. We don't know when we're going to be able to reopen to the public, just due to this COVID situation that we're in right now. But when we are able to reopen, it is admission by donation. We do these talks in person as well on Tuesdays, and then occasionally in the evenings as well, usually on Thursdays. There are some events that we do that do have a small fee associated with them, but that's known well in advance. But there are memberships available to the museum where you're supporting the museum and you get discounts in our gift shop, or to workshops or research services, voting rights at our AGM, and things like that as well. Okay.
Okay. So we have some upcoming virtual small talks in the next few weeks. So there's Small Talk Tuesdays, which are every Tuesday at 1 p.m. And Small Talk Evenings every Wednesday at 7 p.m. And upcoming talks will include how to care for your heirlooms, the history of the Transcona Museum, the Transcona shops, and communities that time forgot, discussing communities of Monte Vista and Southland. So information on our upcoming talks is available on our website. It's also where you will RSVP there as well. It's also on our Facebook pages and other social medias.
Mm-hmm. And the evening talks run 1 week behind the Tuesday talks.
Mm-hmm. Correct. And these talks are free. So during this time, we would ask that if you can support the museum in any way, that would be wonderful. So consider making a donation or becoming a museum member. Alana just outlined some of the great benefits of being a museum member.
And
You can also,
you
oh,
can
sorry.
donate to the museum through our website, and it goes through Canada Helps. You can also purchase your membership right now on the website as well. It's under events, so right where you were RSVPing to this event, you scroll down to the bottom, it's purchase or renew a membership is available down there.
You can also support us by staying in touch. You can follow us on our website, www.transconamuseum.mb.ca. We're active on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We have a YouTube channel. We have a blog. You can also join our mailing list, and you will receive monthly e-newsletters with information on upcoming events and other activities at the museum. And we only send that out about once a month at the beginning of the month, or there may be occasional one-off emails during the middle of the month, but we don't spam your email inbox.
We had a question, will the recording be published? If everything worked out, we're looking at uploading this to our YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
So we will definitely be posting it on social media once we have it up there. If for some reason the recording didn't work properly, Jennifer and I will re-record this ourselves, this presentation, and then get it uploaded as well.
So that's it for us tonight. Thank you once again, and we hope that you will join us for upcoming small talks. Once again, you can RSVP to those through our website, and thanks again.
Yes, have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.